I Can Talk to the Nearly Dead in My Dreams, a Creepy Conceptions original. Artwork by Kanarushi. Part 2. The Worst Kind of Angel. I was 10 years old when it happened again. I suddenly found myself in a dark hallway inside of what initially looked like a normal house. It was dark, but I could see the outlines of picture frames on the walls. A door on my left had a big poster in the shape of a circle. I squinted in the dim light of the moon that was coming from a window I couldn't see and read the word Mets. At the end of the hall was a console table that held a few trophies. More picture frames cluttered the wall above them. My body moved to a door on the right, white and blank, my hand turning the knob and carefully pushing it open. I stepped into a brightly lit room where the sun shone from the window directly across from me. At this point, I didn't register the shift to daylight until after I had woken up. I simply closed the door behind me. On the left was a bunk bed that had one top bunk with a desk in place of what would have been the bottom bunk. I realized this wasn't a house, it was a condo, as I could see from the view outside the window that I was in a large city, inside a building several stories up. To my right was a TV with several consoles underneath. A large orange beanbag chair was positioned in front of it, and on that chair was a girl. She was facing away from me and focused on one of those war video games that I wasn't allowed to play yet. The books on the desk read pre-calculus and English literature, telling me that she was probably in high school. I walked over to the window and looked down at the city. It was a large city, but in between the buildings, I could see a massive, rectangular patch of green. "Hannah!" called a woman's voice. "Yeah?" the girl called back. She paused her game and set the controller beside her. It was during this motion that she was able to spot me from the corner of her eye, standing at her window. She stood abruptly and was in front of me faster than I thought humanly possible. Her eyes filled with fear, her voice frantic, and her words erratic. She pushed me into the ladder of the bunk bed forcefully, hands on my chest. I couldn't follow what she was saying, and I told her this. She paused for a moment, trying to collect herself, the intensity never leaving her eyes. "She's the worst kind of angel," said Hannah. "She's torturing and killing us all." "Who?" I asked. I was terrified, but my voice was somehow calm, as if someone else were speaking. I felt like I was outside of my own body. "Sarah. She works at night." Her voice was hurried and agitated. "She's stealing the medications and giving them to the wrong kids. She's putting disease inside of us. Please, please, you have to help." She lost control again, and her words regained their frenzied nature. She screamed about the worst kind of angel, about how I had to help her, how the angel needed to be stopped. She put her hands on my arms and shook me back and forth. I wanted to cry, but I was merely an observer within my own body. Hannah was on her knees in front of me now, the room dark once again, and I could hear multiple voices around me. I heard her say she didn't have much time. "Sarah killed her," she said. I woke up in a panic, jumping out of my bed and flipping on the lights. I could feel the tears stinging at the corners of my eyes. I swung open the door and started to run toward my aunt's room when I heard the baby crying down the hall. I could see that the light was on, which meant my aunt was likely in the room with the baby. She had been unable to sleep for several nights after she brought home my baby cousin. And here I was, about to bother her with my nightmares. I hugged myself in the empty hall and walked back to my room, shutting the door behind me and sliding down to the floor as I cried softly. Flashes of Hannah's face contorted in terror kept replaying in my mind, and I was afraid to close my eyes. I remembered my dream with my grandmother, about how distinctly I remembered everything, like I had been to that place several times before. I felt the same familiarity with this dream, like I knew where I was. I saw everything in sharp and frightening clarity. I was getting tired again, so I stood up, unwilling to go back to that place. I saw my phone charging on my nightstand, and despite the red digits of my alarm clock telling me it was past 11 at night, I decided to call my best friend. I sat on the edge of my bed and put the phone to my ear. It rang once before a male voice greeted me from the other side.
Hey, kiddo. What are you doing up?
Hey, Dad.
Oh, whoa, sweetie. Are you crying?
I had a really bad dream and I didn't want to bother Aunt Kelly since the baby is crying too.
Well, you know you can always call me. Do you want to tell me what it was about?
I stayed quiet for a bit, the memories still filling me with dread. But under the dread was a sense of urgency I couldn't quite place, an urgency that was too complex for my 10-year-old mind to understand, let alone communicate it to another.
Do you remember when I had that dream about Grandma right before she died?
Um, yeah, I do.
My dad was forever the skeptic, and the tale of my grandmother made him uncomfortable. It was something he couldn't explain, yet also couldn't deny, and he told me this years later.
It was like that. It felt the same as that dream.
You had a dream about your grandma?
No, it was with a girl I never met. She was scared just like Grandma was, and she was really forceful and strong. I don't know who she is, but it was the same kind of dream.
I was getting a bit upset at myself for not knowing exactly how to explain it.
What do you mean, the same kind of dream? What happened?
I took a breath to gather my thoughts and tried to clarify what I meant.
Usually, my dreams don't have like all my senses, but in this dream, it's more like a memory. Like, I can smell things and I can see them better. I can feel everything. She lived in an apartment, and I felt like I could hear the people that lived upstairs walking around.
I had never lived in an apartment. I always lived with my grandmother, and my aunt had inherited her single story house. When she got married, her husband sold his condo and moved in. At that time, I didn't know that apartment dwellers could hear their neighbors moving about the entire day. I proceeded to explain the dream in detail, from the poster on the door to the name of the video game the girl had been playing, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. I described the girl, Hannah.
She had long braids tied in kind of like a ponytail. She has dark skin and her eyes are a hazel brown.
I could hear typing in the background. My dad, the skeptic, unable to ignore the fact that his daughter could have never come up with that amount of detail on her own. He still hung on to his skepticism as he searched various social medias until he found what he was looking for. He told me not to worry and that he would look into it. He began asking me about other things, distracting me. He asked about middle school. He talked about the activities we had planned for that summer. After graduation, he was going to bring me back home with him, and we were going to spend a month on his parents' farm. I was soon lying down, eyes drooping, and I wound up falling asleep with my face on my phone. Hannah Williams was 16 when she died unexpectedly in the pediatric ICU of a hospital in New York. She had come in for an asthma attack. She had used her inhalers at home but was having more and more trouble breathing. They got the asthma under control in the ER and decided to keep her overnight on a continuous therapy and monitor her. That night, she got worse, a lot worse. She stopped breathing, went into a coma, and was put on life support. A few days later, she died. This was only one of several suspicious deaths in the ICU where Sarah Jones was a nurse. Statistical analysis revealed that almost 80% of deaths in the pediatric ICU occurred when Sarah was working. Out of 168 hours in a week, Sarah only worked 36. To have 80% of deaths occur on her shift, with a sharp increase beginning approximately 6 months after her date of hire, required explanations outside of random chance. Sarah Jones was the worst kind of angel, an angel of death. A murderer speculated to have killed at least 12 children over the span of 2 years. There were also various cases where a child would suddenly become sicker without explanation. An autopsy of Hannah Williams revealed fecal matter in her lungs. a fact that disturbed her poor parents to the core. Sarah also replaced some of the sedatives with normal saline or water from the sink. Rumors floated around that she would use toilet water as well, though this is unconfirmed. You see, in the ICU, it was common practice for a doctor to administer a sedative to put a child to sleep before giving them a paralytic, which stopped them from breathing or being able to move. In that way, they would have no gag reflex and were less likely to throw up when an endotracheal tube was inserted into their airways. But the paralytic is just that, a paralytic. It doesn't take away pain or put anyone to sleep. That's what the sedative is for. Replacing them with water made it so that the child would feel everything as it was happening but wouldn't be able to move or breathe. They would be trapped in their own bodies. Also, using sink water introduced bacteria into their veins, putting them at risk for infection. Hannah Williams' parents think that Sarah may have snuck peanuts into her food, to which she was very allergic. She finished her off by taking feces from another child and putting it in her tube in an act of pure sadism. New York doesn't have a death penalty, so Sarah Jones continues to rot in jail. My dad didn't tell me anything about it until I was older. He said he took care of it, but the details of it came after. He started researching, and it wasn't long before he came across an article in the New York Times. The parents of Hannah Williams were calling for an investigation after the sudden death of their daughter. Authorities refused to perform an autopsy due to the lack of apparent foul play. They claimed that the records show that the procedures performed were done appropriately and efficiently, and that they were the correct procedures given the nature of the illness. The family was preparing to hire their own third-party forensic pathologist to perform the autopsy when they received a private message on their daughter's memorial page. It was from my dad, who had offered to pay for the autopsy as well as take on the case pro bono. He was forthcoming about what led him to suspect Sarah Jones, and when the autopsy returned the horrifying results, the hospital itself ran the statistical analyses that led to the environmental services staff searching the trash outside of her patients' rooms during and after her shifts. It wasn't long before fecal matter, urine, and rat poison was discovered in a syringe in one of the bins, and a warrant was placed for the search of her home and vehicle. The same brand of rat poison in both her vehicle and her home led to her swift arrest. Like I said before, these dreams are few and far between. I don't understand why it happens, or how they can find me, or why they can only do so when they are dying. It happens more often now, but it still only happens about once every 6 months. The person is always desperate to get one thing, one point across, and they are limited to this information. At first, I thought they were reaching out to me, but they seem instead to be inviting me into a memory. It is normally a place where they spent a great deal of time in a relaxed state. It serves as a blank canvas for our encounter, and the memory plays out normally until they notice me, which they always do. Yes, I have tried hiding. These memories also come with other memories, isolated ones that seem to have no real connection to the place I'm invited to or the message I'm being given. For Grandma, I remember watching from her eyes as she sat at her sewing machine, feeling her foot press against the pedal as she fed the cloth through. For Hannah, I remembered standing in front of sheet music as I practiced scales on the flute. No matter how many times it happens, I am still just as terrified as that first time with my grandmother. I've come to think that it's actually their fear that I'm feeling and not my own, but the fear itself is something I've learned to fear. Sometimes I lie awake in bed, afraid of my sleeping hours, wishing that someone else could take on this burden. Some people have told me that it's a gift, and though I admit that I'm able to do good with it, I hate the actual process to the point that I think I would choose to get rid of it if given the chance, even though I would lose my ability to help people in the way that I do. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you are enjoying my story so far. Please like if you like, comment, share, and subscribe. Remember to turn on notifications so that you can be on the lookout for the third and final part of this story, where our protagonist finally meets her biological mother in her dream. I have a home recording studio now, so that will be out this weekend. Send any prompt requests to stories at creepyconceptions.com. You can commission artwork by Kanarushi at commissions@kanarushistudios.com. She is certified in multiple media and she literally blows my mind with her art. Thank you once again, and as always, stay creepy, my lovelies.